The bluegrass of Kentucky. There's never been a better place to raise a thoroughbred racehorse, and there's no better time to be in Kentucky than the beginning of springtime. The new foals are at play in the newly turned green fields, and the 3-week season of racing is underway at historic KEENELAND Racecourse. Hello, I'm Jim McKay, and along with my colleague Jack Whitaker, we welcome you to the Thoroughbred Classics and our look at the history of one of the major Kentucky Derby spring prep races, the Bluegrass Stakes at KEENELAND.
Yes, Jim, no race has had such an impact on the Derby as the Bluegrass Stakes. More than 20 Derby winners prepped at KEENELAND before making the 75-mile trip west to Churchill Downs. KEENELAND is unique and lives by its motto, racing as it was meant to be.
Well, I think the primary reason is that it was founded and has been run by horsemen throughout its 64-year history, that the founders were all primarily interested in the welfare and the well-being of the horse, the safety of the racetrack, the ambience of the whole facility, the barn areas, all directed toward the comfort and well-being of the horse.
The first race at the present KEENELAND course was run in October of 1936. J.O. Jack Keene originally laid out what is the current track in the 1920s on his farm 6 miles west of Lexington. But it took a driving force like Hal Price Headley to get the track going. What KEENELAND has become, offering racing's richest daily purses, more than $600,000, no one could have imagined, including the veteran horseman Herb Stevens.
This place started out just a little country racetrack. Nobody ever thought this place would amount to anything. Mr. Headley didn't think so. But we had the old Lexington racetrack in town, and it went broke, and they sold it to the government in 1933. And we had no racetrack then. And Mr. Headley said, well, we got to have a racetrack at KEENELAND where we can get our young horses ready to do something before we ship them away. So he went up and down Main Street, begged, borrowed, and stole money, and got enough together to buy this property, and they built this racetrack.
One thing everyone agrees on, though, is that when horses come to KEENELAND in the springtime, they really come alive.
The horse really blossomed and bloomed once he got here. I think the tranquility of the barn area, the ability to go out and graze on grass, either in between the barns or out in our fields, gave them a sort of an opportunity to freshen up and to sort of get a renewed spirit and enthusiasm.
WHIRLAWAY was the first bluegrass winner to go on and win a classic race when he swept the Triple Crown in 1941. Shutout scored the Bluegrass Derby double the very next year. And here's Tommy Lee on the rail under Bill Shoemaker, winning the 1959 Bluegrass on his way to winning the Roses.
The Bluegrass really came into prominence probably in the late 50s with Tommy Lee, who won and then went on to win the Derby. And during about a 14-year period there were 9 horses that went on to run in the Bluegrass and win the Derby. It firmly established it as the most important Kentucky Derby prep.
Coming up, the Bluegrass Stakes in the decades of the 1960s and 1970s, when it produced winners of 19 different Triple Crown races.
1960 saw the Bluegrass Stakes produce 6 Kentucky Derby winners, starting in 1962 with Decidedly, and the next year, Chateau Gay. In 1964, a little colt from Canada named Northern Dancer came to KEENELAND with some big questions, as racing historian Ed Bowen remembers.
The first Bluegrass Stakes I saw was won by Northern Dancer, and even though he had gone 1 1/8 in winning the Flamingo and Florida Derby in Florida, there was some question of him getting the distance. He was trained by an absolute wonderful horseman named Horatio Luro, and in those days, before we learned that the Northern Dancer type would become one of the great influences in pedigrees the world over, there was a question of him getting the distance. And so they were trying to be very careful with him in the Bluegrass Stakes. They didn't want to make it a harder race than it had to be. So Hardtack just sort of snugged him down and back in the stretch, and he wound up winning only by about a half a length.
He just won pulled up, and I was very, very impressed with that. But one of my jobs was to get quotes from the jockeys. And as you well know, Bill Hardtack was not an easy one to talk to the press, but I managed to get to him, and he was very congenial, very cooperative.
A young turf writer for the Lexington Herald paper, Billy Reed, found the Hall of Fame writer Bill Hardtack a bit more intimidating.
The thing that made it tough, especially for a guy covering his first horse race, was that Bill Hardtack, the jockey of Northern Dancer, was not speaking to the media. And so I was kind of scared, but I thought, well, I'm just going to follow him around, and maybe I'll overhear him say something. And sure enough, when the race was over and Northern Dancer had won, he was walking back to the jocks' quarters, and one of the guys that sells the program said, "Hey, Bill, when did you know you had the race won?" Hardtack looked over and he said, "As soon as I got on his back."
Lucky Debonair in 1965 and Proud Clarion and Forward Pass in 67 and 68 would become the next three bluegrass runners to win the Kentucky Derby. The 1970s would start with a real shocker. As he paraded to the gate for the 1970 Bluegrass Stakes, Dusk Commander was a long shot at more than 35 to 1. His jockey, Mike Manganiello, remembers the race.
When I finally asked him to run, he just run up to them, run by them horses, and then I got a couple of challenges down through the lane, and he held on to win by about 3/4 of a length or so.
Dusk Commander had become the biggest long shot in bluegrass history with a 72.80 payoff.
I really didn't believe he would go off that big a price. I knew he'd be, you know, his odds would be good, but I didn't think they'd be that big because he had just got done winning a week before. Pretty impressive race. It was an allowance race, and so I thought he'd get a little recognition, but he never did.
And he didn't 9 days later at Churchill Downs when he was sent off in the Kentucky Derby at 15 to 1 and galloped to a 5-length win, paying $32.60, the biggest Derby payoff in the 1970s.
They're coming on the way, and look at Dusk Commander open up as he hits the finish. Dusk Commander a big winner.
The 70s also produced one of the most emotional moments in the history of the bluegrass or any other race. That story is coming up next on Thoroughbred Classics. Alydar was the star of the East and the darling of Kentucky in the spring of 1978. He came to Keeneland for the Bluegrass Stakes on a 3-race win streak, including the Flamingo and the Florida Derby. He was coming home to the farm where he was bred, the famed Calumet, located right next door to Keeneland. It was to be a very special homecoming.
That was a very memorable occasion in 1978. Admiral and Ms. Markey had never seen Alydar run. In fact, they hadn't seen any of their horses run in recent years at the track. And Alydar was one of the favorites for the Bluegrass. And they were at home next door in Calumet Farm. And we thought it might be appropriate if we invited them come and be present. And we sent a driver and a car over to see if they would accept, and which they did. And they came to Keeneland just moments before the race, and we took them up to the rail, drove the car up the trail on the clubhouse lawn. And they got out, and Ms. Markey was dressed in her usual very lovely outfit, the Admiral with his ascot and his cap, and she had on her long white gloves, and the attendant moved them to the rail, and George Velasquez in the post parade paused in front of them and brought Alydar over.
Hello, George. Hello, my lady. How are you? How you feel? Fine. Here's your baby. Doesn't he look pretty? He looks wonderful. So do you, George.
Thank you. I felt like I did something special for her because by winning the race and by bringing the horse to her, to me, because it was a touching moment, yes.
On the turn from home, as the race, Alydar was beginning to stretch out, and he won by 13.5, that Ms. Markey was waving her white glove, and it was a vignette that is really treasured in Keeneland's history.
I just tried to imagine what they must have been thinking, because he was on his way to a, whatever it was, 8 or 10 length win, and he just looked so powerful and so spectacular. And I thought later on that if that had to be their last glimpse of a Calumet horse running in person, as indeed it was, what a spectacular memory that had to be for them.
this was one of the most beautiful afternoons imaginable, and everything was perfect, you know. The horse ran well. He won by 13 lengths. Mrs. Markey and Admiral Markey got to see him. It was a very sentimental moment, and one of those days you just you didn't want the day to end. You just wanted to hang on to that feeling. And at that time, all things seemed before Alydar. We didn't know then that he was going to lose all 3 Triple Crown races, but he was a great horse anyway, and a horse that people loved, and people in Kentucky were very proud of Alydar.
A great racing memory, the touching meeting of the old owners of Calumet Farm and their stable star, Alydar, before that 1978 Bluegrass. The 1979 Bluegrass saw another dominating performance. In fact, it was spectacular.
As they head for the first turn, Pianist comes up on the inside and puts ahead in front. Bishop's Choice just to the outside of him is second. Lot of Gold is third. And Spectacular Bid, the 4th horse wide, is in there a close 4th. Spectacular Bid that leads as they come around the turn. And we've got a 1/4 mile left in the Bluegrass Stakes. It is Spectacular Bid that's on the rail with the lead. Lot of Gold is still there in second place. And it is Bishop's Choice mating it even more distant third, and Pianist is out of it. Spectacular Bid is out there by 3, now make it 4 lengths. It is Spectacular Bid. Franklin whacks him with a whip, and he draws out to lead it by 4. Lot of Gold is going to be second, and that's the way this race is going to end. It is Spectacular Bid coming to the line with his ears pricking, and as he hits the wire, he is 5 lengths the winner.
The Bid romped to a 7-length win in that 1979 Bluegrass, on his way that spring to winning the Kentucky Derby and Preakness. We'll be back with more Bluegrass memories right after this.
Keeneland Racetrack is a place that cherishes its past and those that are loyal to her. And that's what made the 1980 Bluegrass Stakes so special, because it involved longtime Kentucky horseman Herb Stevens.
Herb has always been a fixture here at Keeneland. He's stabled here, for 40 or 50 years, and he really never left town. He raced his horses here at Keeneland, and in the summertime he would race at River Downs and some of the Ohio tracks. But Herb came up with a good horse occasionally, and a really a top horse in Rock Hill Native.
Well, he was an outstanding favorite, and just the thing just set up for him, and he just laid back there right off the pace, and when he got ready to run, Johnny just shook him up a little bit, and he just won as he pleased. After the race was over and all the hullabaloo of the press and everything, and we went up to have a champagne and all upstairs, and Lucy Bassett walked up to me, and we was up in the library, and she said, "Herb," he said, "I don't know whether you noticed or not, but I said nobody left. The crowd. Ordinarily, when the stakes over, everybody tries to get out quick as they can, but she said everybody stayed because it's the local horse, local people, you know, and it was kind of thrilled to know that people thought enough of you to stay and see you enjoy, winning the local race.
Other Bluegrass highlights of the 1980s included Linkage winning in 1982 to give jockey Bill Shoemaker a record 6th win in Keeneland's most important spring race. In 1987, this incident in the stretch caused Ali Sheba in the white and blue silk to have his Bluegrass victory taken away. He was disqualified and placed 3rd behind War and Leo Castelli. But his trainer, Hall of Famer Jack Van Berg, was still confident about Ali Sheba.
We're going to the Derby. I wouldn't trade places with anybody. I don't think, he may make a fool out of me on TV in front of the whole United States and all the world, but I don't think he will. And he's a good horse. He's legitimate. And I don't know of a horse in the country that I'd trade with.
Jack was right, as Ali Sheba bounced back to win both the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness that spring. Change comes slowly at Keeneland. This was the track that didn't have a track announcer until 1997. So it was really something in 1989 when the track moved the Bluegrass date back from its traditional closing day on Thursday.
For years, it was 9 days before the Derby, and you'll recall that many of the old successful trainers, the Jones brothers and so forth, ran their horses in the Derby trial, Tuesday before the Derby. And the Bluegrass was 9 days before the Derby, and at those times, by the powers to be and the owners and the breeders of the area felt that was a very critical timing in the training regimen. But as the proliferation of stake races became Derby preps across the country, both New York, California, and Florida, it became imperative that we change the interval to 3 weeks, which this was done at the request of the trainers.
In 1990, Summer Squall would start the decade off with a win on his way to the Preakness title that year. But it was the colt that finished third in that Bluegrass, Unbridled, who would win the Roses.
Summer Squall breaks sharply with his Kandari Laxbar, then up from the outside, Land Rush, followed by Shotgun Scott and Unbridled. As they move forward the first turn is Kandari Laxbar on the outside with a short lead. Summer Squall down along the rail is second. Down the stretch, it's Summer Squall on the inside now with the lead. Has it by a length. Land Rush is second, then Unbridled. They're nearing the wire. It's Summer Squall in front, Land Rush second. Under the wire, Summer Squall wins it by about a length and a half. Land Rush finishes second, Unbridled third.
The Bluegrass was a major prepping race to go into the Kentucky Derby. You want your horse ready to win the race, but you don't want to have to use the Bluegrass to get ready to go to the Derby. You do not want the Bluegrass to be the race that you've got to win to prove you're good enough to go to the Derby. You want the Bluegrass to be the race that cements everything that you've accomplished up until then.
Another major change for Keeneland came with corporate sponsorship of the Bluegrass Stakes.
Well, it was a little change from the norm, but we had had a race sponsored with another company prior to the sponsorship of the Bluegrass. But Delta Airlines was the original sponsor in 1993, and they sponsored it for 3 years. And then Toyota Motor Company is now the sponsor, and they've been the sponsor since 1996. And it's been a very good relationship for the both of us. Toyota was a new company that had come to Central Kentucky, and it was kind of the combination of the old combining with the new, and I believe we've both helped each other in that respect.
Two big gray horses had an impact in the 90s, starting with Holy Bull in 1994, owned and trained by the veteran horseman Jimmy CROLL and ridden by Mike Smith.
Well, I figured my plans very well because we went from here to Kentucky. Some people go through New York. We did not. We went right from here to Kentucky, and the Bluegrass was our next big step, which he won.
That was a really big race because he beat Valiant Nature pretty handy. Matter of fact, Valiant Nature ran up to him like he was going to get on by me, and I never even touched Holy Bull with a stick. I just let him switch leads and asked him to run, and he just wound up drawing away and winning by about 4 or 5 again.
In 1996, the husband-wife trainer-owner team of Sonny and CAROLYN HINE brought their gray superstar Skip-Away to the Bluegrass.
I was very fortunate, you know. I enjoyed it going. I went to Keeneland to race with Skip-Away. That was my first trip there. And a member of Skiffington, the trainer, told me, he said, "Sonny, take long underwear and rundowns for the horses." And he was right. It was cold.
Skip-Away really heated things up, though, with a Bluegrass Stakes and track record-breaking performance as he topped Round Table's 1957 standard, covering the 1 1/8 in 1:47.1. CAROLYN HINE would celebrate afterwards, but that night, her dreams turned to nightmares for Sonny.
I couldn't sleep, and I poked Sonny, and he sound asleep, and I pushed him, and I wakened him, and he looked at the time, and he says, "Time to get up," and he looks at the time, and he said, "It's 4 o'clock in the morning." And I said, "I know," but I said, "I'm concerned." I said, "I need a wardrobe. All my clothes are in Florida. I need a new dress, a new suit, a new hat." So he was very generous. He told me to go to Kmart. I think the one thing he keeps forgetting, the horse ran in my name. So I got all the money, and he's sending me to Kmart.
Few families have been as important to Keeneland and to thoroughbred racing in Kentucky as the Hancocks of Claiborne and Stone Farms. In 1997, Claiborne won it with Pulpit for Mrs. A.B. Hancock. And in 1999, her oldest son, Arthur, would try with his colt, Menifee.
Well, all my life, I wanted to win the Bluegrass ever since I was a little boy. I used to come out here with my grandfather, and then with my dad, and winning the Bluegrass was something I always wanted to do. It was a life dream.
And they're off, and Vicker gets away quickly. Menifee from the outside, and Cat Thief between horses with Kimberlite Pipe between them. Right there, fourth. 4 of them across the track as they head to the first turn. And down the stretch they come. Cat Thief has the lead by a head, but on the outside. Here comes Wonder Tross. Here comes at the rail, Vicker. Menifee on the outside. Menifee on the outside gets the lead. Menifee is going to win it by 1. Menifee. with Pat Day aboard, gets the victory.
It did cross my mind about my father, my grandfather, and all my time that I've spent at Keeneland. And it was a very emotional experience. It was a dream come true to win the Bluegrass.
Jack Whitaker, and thanks for joining us on our Thoroughbred Classic look at the Bluegrass Stakes.